Welcome back to part 5 of our instructional piece on Simplified Yang Style 88 form Taijiquan. We have finished opening. We finished grass sparrow's tail. We finished single whip. And now we're into the first play Pipa and white crane. As before, we will be looking at both of these moves. First, with their external components, where our hands go, what our feet do, and then the internal components, what we should be thinking about, what we should be focusing on, what we should be feeling in order to execute the moves effectively. Both of these moves will be finishing in an empty stance, which means that all of our weight will be loaded onto just one foot. First one foot, and then it'll be the other foot, and the other foot will be empty. So that will explain some of the terminology that might be used in this video. Without further ado, let us look at the quick, brief explanation out on the floor before coming back here and doing what we've been doing so far. And picking up, having just finished single whip, here we are. Now, the overall motion of this move, as you can see, we are dropping our backhand, turning, sweeping our left hand across, shifting back, right hand begins to lift. And then as we shift back the rest of the way, we're pulling our foot in through the hips, turning the hips, shoulders turn with the hips this way. This prompts our elbows to lift a little bit, and then resetting the foot into a bit of a press. So externally speaking, this movement has one shift, turn, and replacement. The feet don't move a whole lot, but they do move. And the arms are going to be doing a expansion low, expansion high, expansion low on the left, expansion high on the right, turn, true full expansion through the middle, and then compression as we finish. 1, 2, 3, 4. Just like so. So just as we've finished compression and settling into the core and relaxed, then we begin with the white crane. Turn, hold ball, shift, expand, push the ball, and turn, settle, and again, as you can probably guess, expand into this posture. We will explain what we mean by expanding into these postures in just a minute when we get to the wall. So, coming out of single whip, we are now going to be focusing our attention to the back corner. Whenever we are turning in Taiji, we want to make sure that we are rotating between and through our feet. This has been touched on with single whip last time, as well as with the stationary turns that took place in grasp sparrow's tail. But in this case, we are turning, we're shifting, and then we want to turn this here, just like so, and then shift and focus and replace our front foot, what is to become our front foot, our right foot. The other thing about play Pipa is not only are we turning our attention this way, we are then turning again, and compressing. All this is turning, but all those turns happen just through the foot. We're not going to be shifting our weight back and forth or anything like this. If you are a practitioner of Chen style Taiji, this is going to sound very familiar, but the truth is you should put this into all of your Taiji, any style this should apply to, any style I've ever studied anyway, is we want to differentiate between shifting our weight and turning. Chen makes this very, very clear, but this series of videos is not on Chen style. This is just on the Simplified Yang. However, you still want to do that in Simplified Yang, and actually in any traditional Yang that I've ever touched with as well. So what that means is even though we're over this direction and we're going to finish in that direction, we want to make sure we're not shifting and turning at the same time, right? We want to think shift 1, turn 2. In this case, we have to open the back foot. So open the back foot, shift 1, turn 2. Shift, turn, and turn. This is going to help with your stability. It's going to help with your balance. Really, it's going to help with your root. If you're just getting balance out of this, then you need to be relaxing a little bit more into your feet, holding standing post a bit longer every day, something like that. Just something to get your root engaged. We'll probably cover root in more depth in some other video, but we're not doing that today. We're just focusing on, in this case, shift the weight first, turn the hips second. Then shift again and turn as necessary. Every move is going to be like that in our form. We'll be shifting and then we'll be turning, or we'll be turning and then we will be shifting. But we're doing the two distinct things. We're not doing both at the same time, one and then the other. So this then brings us to what our hands are doing. We already looked at the external expressions of the hands out on the floor. So internally, we want to connect the actions of our arms, our upper body, with the actions of our legs, our lower body, into one cohesive whole. So let's go back to what we understand of, so far at least, of Taiji martial theory and our four principal Taiji methods or postures. Ward off, roll back, press, and push. When we think of ward off, we're thinking of expansion. We're thinking of roll back, we're thinking of contraction. When we're thinking of press, we're thinking of compression. When we're thinking of push, we're thinking of applying pressure in some fashion. Usually forward. Push is almost always in a forward direction of some kind. Now, play Pipa is pretty cool in this regard because I think you can see very clearly, if subtly, all four of these on display at different parts of the move, especially the ward off and roll back components, sort of the principal two expansion, contraction elements of Taiji, and the compression as well. So to begin with, we start our play Pipa in the single whip position. As we are shifting, we're dropping this arm down. We don't just want to think of relaxing it and just sort of limply throwing it off to the side in order to get it out of the way, right? We want to think of pulling. We're pulling it to come down just as we're pulling into our back leg. We've opened the foot to prepare to turn, and now we're pulling into our hips, pulling through the wrist, through the elbow, through the shoulder, down, leading this way, leading it away. This other arm, too, is now turned. We're pulling it by turning it and now pulling it across. Turn and pull across. That prompts us to turn our foot, and now we pull in the other direction, just like kind of like a rollback. Pull here. In this case, it's this way, almost like rollback, this way down into our other hip. That prompts the other arm, turn. Now this is expanding out to reach, and then it too begins to pull this way. 1, 2, pull, 3, and now we begin our compression, compress. And just at the end, that compression this way, or remember what I said about two hands coming together with press, with compression. We're also doing just a little bit of a motion forward through, we don't want to think of reaching forward with our wrists. It's coming just a little bit forward with our, really just through our core, because as our core sinks and settles and drops, we're reaching forward. Not too much. In some of the traditional yang, they'll have this sort of motion where you're reaching in for this. The Simplified doesn't do that, but there is sort of a ghost of a hint of that in the form, in the movement. So keep that in mind as you do all the other play Pipas in the rest of the form. We will be covering play Pipa one more time, at least one more time, even though we're not going to be spending much time on the repetition moves, because on this case, play Pipa is on the left. When we do it in about 2 moves from now, it's going to be on the right, and I do want to spend a little bit of time illustrating the differences for that, but that can wait. Now, we have mentioned in the past that we do not want to think with our hands too much. One other way of thinking of this is we don't want our mind to be stuck in our hands. So what we mean by this is intuitively, that's mostly how we think and how we move going through life to do things. If we're trying to reach something, we're thinking of trying to get our hand to the thing that we're trying to reach for basically as quickly and directly as possible, even if we're taking our time. So what that tends to mean is that we start with our hand, and then the rest of the body has to catch up with what the hand is doing. We want to undo some of that. It's a perfectly natural way of going through life, but Taiji, and in fact most martial arts, I believe, want you to unlearn a little bit of that. If you want to reach something, then if it's outside of your proper range of motion, you want to move your whole body closer to it. Which means, really, you want to start with your understanding being here. You want to start with your mind here in your core, and then position your core someplace that the rest of the body can reach whatever you're doing. For Taiji, it's not always about reach. Sometimes it's about just getting into a particular posture for a particular reason, for martial purposes, just for health, for breathing, whatever. But in order to get into that posture, we want to start with the same idea. Start with our mind here in our core, and then the body will position our body around this in order to fulfill the movement. So what this really comes down to is, as I mentioned before, you want to learn the moves before you start to apply this sort of theory. But once you know the moves of the form, then you should be sort of reverse engineering it in this way. So you want to know this is the pattern of play Pipa, right? But once you know that, once you practice that, once you've started to get an idea of how to relax into that a little bit, then you want to start thinking of, all right, I don't want to just have my hands sort of doing this pattern out in the air in front of me. I want to think of, how do I get my hands to end up in this posture from, one, by relaxing as much as I can in a practical sense, but two, by using the muscles furthest away from my arms, so to speak, in order to do that. So how do I get my arms to be as relaxed as I can, and then I'm turning, expanding through the core, and then relaxing into place. When we do the form for solo practice, remember the form is a pattern of movements, and you can train them. You can train it different ways in order to get different things out of it. One way you should train is, once in a while, very high stances, very, very, very relaxed, as relaxed as humanly possible. Don't train it every time like that, but train it once in a while like that. Other times you should train it very, very deep stances and focusing on that stretch that we talked about before. Get that stretch that's in every move and keep that stretch. It's very tiring and strenuous. But you want to train that every once in a while that way too. And then the rest of the time train it sort of I would recommend medium stance, medium height, and then infusing what you've learned through these extreme practices, extreme yang, extreme yin, so to speak, into really what Taiji should be performed at, which is a synthesis of the two. Or balance, I guess. Synthesis or balance. Now, how this applies to play Pipa is it applies to every move the same exact way, really. But in this case, with play Pipa, what I was talking about before with we get all the way out here, and then we have our compression. Remember, the compression isn't just going to be hands out here pressing this way. You're not going to have a whole lot of leverage to do that. If you notice, when people are applying pressure this way, their hands are much closer together because that's how our bodies are designed to be applying pressure that way. In this case, the pressure is going to be slightly in this way. But we want to think not with the hands, right? We want to think elbows, shoulders, chest, expand through the back, compress through the chest, and drop into the core. And remember, relaxed as you can. You are still using muscular movement, but you want it to be springy. You want it to be supple, perhaps. You don't want it to be limp. Compress. And now as we have that compress, eventually we reach the point where that compression is going to get just a bit forward too, just a tiny bit. You almost want to just think about doing that forward motion without actually doing it. That's how little it's going to be. But it's still important and it's still there, and you still want to practice it or keep mindfulness of it in case you end up in a position where you end up using this posture for some particular reason. So that gets us to the end of play the Pipa, and now we will come around into white crane. Externally, we already saw what that looks like. Our hands in front of us come to form our handy ball, and then we turn, push the ball under the arm, and rotate out into the posture. One arm high, one arm low. Internally, we want to think of that compression that we're getting at the end of Pipa. It's almost going to feel like we're rotating around that compression. So we have our hands here, and as we're holding the ball, we don't suddenly just lose this compressive aspect and then just pick up something else with the ball. We're actually going to be in this here. We're sort of applying compression to an external body, and then we're just pulling through the arm on the left to lift, pressing, continuing the press through here. So we have a hold the ball as we've rotated our left foot in. So this rotation is what's causing this compression. And then we shift. Shift the weight, pick the weight off of the left, and pull this up as we push this out. And then as we turn and settle, this settling is going to be expanding upwards and dropping. We want to think of almost like simultaneously pushing this elbow forward as well as dropping it into place, like so. The left hand is coming around to our table. It's coming from across us. Remember our center line rule. We don't want our wrist to cross our center line. It's going to be coming across, dropping the shoulder, dropping the elbow, expanding outwards into positioning our hand on our table. So one of the nice instructive things about Simplified Yang 88 is that you have little components of the moves that are going to be in all sorts of places. So for instance, we have a ball. Other side, same side. It's always this height, always this big when we're holding the ball. We'll see that again. I mean, we saw that already with ward off, right? We're going to see it again when we get to part horse's mane. In this case, we see it right here in white crane. Same ball. It's the exact same ball. Likewise, do we have a table? When we're doing a brush knee, we'll see the table very extensively. The brush knee is going to be the next piece, actually. When we do this one, white crane, it goes to our table. When we do, again, ward off, we have our table. This is the same place every time. We're putting our hand in the same place every time. Some other martial arts don't have that kind of convenient consistency. I say it's instructive because it helps you learn the form a little easier when you know, when you're learning a new move and you know half of it already. It just makes it easier to digest. So get used to that. That's kind of fun in Yang 88, Simplified Yang 88. With regard to our center line rule, I don't know if I've touched on this too much yet. This is one of the general principles of movement for Taiji, really for, frankly, any martial art. I think once you learn this, or if you don't know it already, you probably already have an intuitive understanding of it. But once you learn it, you're going to want to do it all the time, or just pay attention to it all the time. So, center line, think of your sternum to your belly button, your navel, and your wrist. Don't let your wrists go across the center line, either way. You can do your hand. Your hand can go across, that's fine, but not your wrist. The reason for this is you can test it yourself. You know, when you have your wrist right on the center line, you can apply pressure in towards you, and you can just relax, and this is just going to hold that pressure. Anywhere out here is fine. Once this wrist goes across the center line, the shoulder can no longer maintain that structure and that posture, so you collapse. No matter what you're doing, with enough pressure, you will collapse very easily once you've crossed that center line, and it's immediate as soon as it happens. It's just the way the body's designed. This has its opposite, its corollary, in the form of not letting your elbows go behind the line of your back this way. So same problem. You know, if your elbows are back here, it's much harder for you to load the shoulder in order to get them here. Here, you can withstand force all day. Back here, that's going to get all caught up in the shoulders, and the shoulders don't like that. It doesn't feel good. Remember, for Taiji, we're trying to figure out how to get all of the mass and flexible parts, all of the muscular parts, all of the solid parts of our abdomen, and use that to generate the force and the power we want to use for martial development, or just for handier, easier, healthier living as well. So in the case of the crossing your center line or extending your elbows behind you too far, you'll notice that what's happening is the mass of the body can no longer talk to the extremities of the arms. You know, even though they're still obviously connected, the tension that you're employing in order to deliver force all the way out to the arms, all the way out through the hands, is no longer able to be used because you've shut off a joint effectively. You've closed a joint. We don't want to close joints unless they're other people's. Good. There's not too much to really talk about with Pipa or white crane. So I'm going to pretty much wrap things up on this note. Remember, as we're doing both of these, the postures that you're finishing in are very upright and very single-weighted postures. They're both empty stances. But just because they're upright doesn't mean that we shouldn't still be maintaining that drop and that stretch along the spine. So as you complete the moves, get to here, we want to think the pelvis should still want to drop down just as much as the crown of the head wants to pull up. You want to do both at the same time. That's part of settling. You want to think as you finish every move, you want to settle into the move with that pulling through the spine and settling, dropping, relaxing as much as you can through the legs and the arms around the frame that you've just set yourself up for. You can almost think of positioning your frame as if you are positioning a wire frame, a coat hanger, and then you're just relaxing around that frame, like a coat hanger holds up your shirt. You want the rest of your body to be just relaxed around that frame. Practice it that way. When you actually implement it, it'll take on different kinds of expressions, but you want to practice it that way to begin with. And this brings us to the conclusion. So the moves in Taiji are all named they're sort of mnemonic devices. Most of them are anyway. Some of them are telling you exactly what you're doing, like ward off and roll back. But in the case of something like play Pipa, there's a cultural element that's missing in the sense that we in the West, most of us have no idea what a Pipa is. And if you're playing it, well, let's assume that it's a musical instrument, because it is. It's a lute. They're pretty cool, actually. I've never seen anybody quite play them out this way, but I guess you could. Likewise with white crane. Funny story about that, actually. This may have been one of the visiting Chen masters that said something like this, but if I remember right, one of the masters had expressed that the move had originally been named the gray goose or white duck stands indignantly, which gives it a bit more of a threatening air, to be honest with you. I don't know. It could have all been made up, so who knows? I don't remember who I heard that from, but it's an anecdote that's stuck in my head ever since. So anyway, that brings us to the end. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching if you're still here. As I've said in all the other pieces so far, these are not intended to be replacements for real instruction and real practice. You want to do your training at home. I hope these are just helping to illuminate certain aspects of these moves that you probably already know, I hope. If you don't already know them, I highly encourage you to find an instructor to teach them to you properly and use these only as supplementary elements or things just to get you thinking about it. And as always, you can find us here in bucolic Glen Burnie, Maryland. If you're local and you want to come learn directly under us, as I encourage you to. But if you're not local, then go find somebody good and train under them. Train. It's all a matter of training. You can get all the moves you've ever wanted. You can learn all the moves from different people. You can learn every move from everybody. But it's not going to matter if you don't train at least something heavily over and over again. That's where you're going to get good. That's where you're going to actually learn something. Just knowing the forms and patterns of the movements isn't enough to constitute real knowledge, in my opinion. Knowledge is something that is understood. Knowledge of a movement is understood from inside rather than just imitating the external components of it, really engaging with the internal, the meat of it. Just like music. Actually, it's just like music. So, thank you again for listening, and we look forward to having you back in the next one, which will be brush knee.